Good Friday, everyone. Today we will have a very short lesson, a very brief and simple lesson, honestly. First of all, because it's Friday and soon you will have to do your second assignment, in which you will have to address topics such as biocentrism, ecocentrism, and sentiocentrism. So I want you to be entirely focused on your assignment and to reflect on the previous lesson. The previous lesson was especially important, and I know it was difficult and full of concepts, so I want you to listen it maybe a couple of times and read with calm what you have to read. So today I will just sketch a bit what is virtuetics, because we've mentioned so far virtuetics just once, but we never spoke about it. We have spoken about deontology and Kantian ethics. We have spoken about utilitarianism, and we have already seen how you could apply those theories to non-human animals, to ecosystems, and to like other living beings. So you can combine Kantian ethics and utilitarianism and consequentialism with different non-anthropocentric perspectives. And I think it's great. I think that now you know about these two classical Western ethical theories, the most dominant, the most prominent, the most widespread, and you know that they encounter the problem of anthropocentrism, and they can interact and contaminate. And you also know, because I said it many times, that at the end of the day, reality it's much more complex than the simple calculation that we can do once seated at our desk about what is good, what is evil, what is right, and what is wrong. For sure, we can calculate all the consequences. We can put down our moral principles, but our calculation will always be limited because our knowledge is limited, and because we are not fully rational when we act. We are much more complex. We are much more complex animal entities. And one kind of ethics that tend to acknowledge this and to keep in mind the fact that we evolve, we change with the age, we grow in terms of experiences, we have a better know-how also about how to relate with other people, also non-human people, that take into account the existentialist and psychological aspect of our life, is the virtue ethics. The virtue ethics simply is something very pretty much typical of many traditions, but like for example, if you think about Confucianism and the Chinese tradition, you can see that there are many other cultures that tend to focus on a virtue ethics or an ethic that basically focus on developing a right type of personality, a virtuous personality. But in the Western tradition, is a Greek author, the one that made popular the notion of virtue ethics, and is Aristotle. Aristotle, especially with his book Nicomachean Ethics. After basically 2000 years old, 2000 years, we still move inside the framework of the Nicomachean Ethics when we talk about virtue ethics in the Western framework. I will try to be as simple as possible in explaining this. So, what is virtue ethics? What is virtue ethics? Is an ethics that doesn't focus on giving answer about what is right and what is wrong, or who is the necessarily the moral patient, but is focused on what makes someone a good person, what is to live a good life, a good human life. So it's about what make of a subject a good subject. Aristotle tried to codify which were the virtues, for example, courage, generosity, etc. But for sure, this kind of virtue ethics must base on a broader framework. For Aristotle, the broader framework was a kind of cosmic order in which everything had a telos. Telos means purpose. So the purpose of a plant is to grow and to thrive. For an animal, pretty much the same. The purpose of an artifact like a knife is to cut well. Of a chair is to be comfortable if you sit on it. For a human being, the purpose is to live a rational life, to live a good life. And in the Nicomachean Ethics and in general virtue ethics, what is good for oneself tend to coincide what is morally good. So, in the teleological worldview of Aristotle, in which everything has a purpose, humans must pursue as rational beings a good life. But the rationality in Aristotle is not just about calculations, it's a rationality that involves practical knowledge, emotional knowledge, and many aspects. It's much more wide as a kind of rationality. And for humans, living a rational life, it means to live a virtuous life, it means to live well, and in a certain sense, it means to pursue happiness through virtue. Virtue are not alternative to happiness. You cannot be virtuous and unhappy. And another important thing is you cannot be virtuous in some aspects and not in others, because to be fully virtuous, you need to combine things, combine courage and generosity, modesty. You should combine several aspects, and you do it in by learning, by observing, by having good models. This is pretty much what makes virtue ethics much more flexible and much more easy to apply in real life, in the sense that you behave well by observing people behaving well, etc. It doesn't give you a pre-made once for all answer for every situation. There is no principle on the above. We have mentioned last time the fact that Kantian ethics look upstream, while consequentialism and utilitarianism looks downstream. We can say that virtue ethics just look at the position you are, and the position you are change over time, and you change over time, and you acquire knowledge, expertise to better behave. Undoubtedly, there is still an open question: which kind of models are good models? If you have to learn virtue by observing virtuous people, how can you be sure that they're virtuous? This is a kind of impasse that you will find in virtue ethics. I have to say that in our manual there is not enough. Our manual doesn't delve enough into why Aristotle say that certain virtues are virtuous, but Aristotle on average based on the doxa, on the kind of common knowledge. But we can say that our common knowledge right now is an environmental common knowledge. Our common knowledge right now should take into account sexism, should take into account racism, should take into account classism, should take into account all the form of injustice and respond to this. So a virtuous person is a person that responds to this kind of oppressions, also to environmental oppressions, also to animal oppressions, also to anthropocentrism and human supremacy, and so on. So one way to move beyond a very anthropocentric vision of virtue ethics is, for example, to find good people that represent a different model. And also we need to move away from the organicistic cosmology and order that is at the base of the metaphysics of Aristotle, because for Aristotle humans were the pinnacle of the living world. They were above animals, they were above plants, and they were above rocks. Instead, if we really want to think in an ecocentric, biocentric, non-anthropocentric perspective, we need to change this approach, and part of the ethics could be respectful to our nature, be humble toward nature, being compassionate toward non-humans, and so on. One way is to follow classical example of humans that have been particularly attentive toward their relationship with non-humans. You can take many examples. In the book you will find David Thoreau, the author of famous to have left all behind to go to live into the woods for a period of his life. You can follow the example of Rachel Carson, fundamental author that wrote Silent Spring, denouncing the danger of pesticides. You can follow Aldo Leopold, already mentioned in the previous lesson, that he was able to pass from just one of the many managers of forestry to a person that was sensible at the point of creating a land ethic. You can take into consideration, for example, Ernie Ness, the father of deep ecology. You can maybe see other people, I don't know, even Peter Singer, or you can see, for example, activists that maybe are not an example of virtues in the sense of having an old life full of experiences, but you can still find inspiration from other models. I mean, you can have Jane Goodall, for example, but you can have also the activist of, for example, Extinction Rebellion, the activists of Just Stop Oil, many movements now. I don't know in the US which are the most spread, but I think about Earth First, I think about many eco-resistance that was widespread and still widespread in many areas of the world. I'm thinking about eco-feminist movement in India against Monsanto. I can think about native people resisting on native land against pipelines. I can think about vegan and animal liberation activists. You can think about many kind of humans that tend to express a virtue that is not just based on 360 virtue, but also based on a certain kind of sensibility toward the non-human world. For this very reason, I thought that being the chapter of the manual a bit too short, a bit too not giving the right taste of what virtues can mean and how the psychological aspect of human life can influence our decision, I wanted to give you to read something that is more about emotions, more about feeling for nature, more about feeling for other living beings, feeling a certain kind of kinship and relation with non-humans and landscapes and ecosystems and species and so on and so forth. So I think that from one side you can read the few pages you will have about virtue ethics, but then if like me you will feel a bit unsatisfied, I suggest and I wanted you to read the article of Morning Letter of Pike, because I think that it's a great idea to rethink everything that you have studied so far, especially, for example, human supremacy and anthropocentrism, and how people instead can think outside of anthropocentrism, not just using rational theories, Kantian theories, utilitarianism, etc., but also with a more kind of gut feeling based on empathy, sympathy, compassion, etc. So it's in other words, what I want you to do is to stop 1 second at the end of this second week and think about the role of emotions, the role of feelings.